Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, February 12th. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. It seems like maybe the algorithm has finally found an audience for me somewhat, or that one day in which I had like 150 views and then that seemed to disappear somehow triggered the algorithm to reconsider some of these live streams and put them in front of more people. But the last stream did have like 38 views, which is way more than the number of views have been in really bad times where I'd get 1 or 2 views. It's still not any significant than that number. Like you can't maintain a YouTube channel and be successful unless you're getting at least 10,000 views, I would say, on a video, or you just have a massive amount of videos in your backstock that are getting you a ton of views also, which I do have that. But maybe there is just some more excitement. I can't really gauge it around Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel due to the 2nd anniversary, which I would say Konami is not doing the best job of that. And right now Konami, if they were doing anything, they should be promoting the Silent Hill short message demo game, whatever, and then they should be trying to slowly build hype around Metal Gear Solid Delta, and they should be probably announcing 2 or 3 more games that are at least licensed by them. But on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Aspect, they don't really promote that. Like, I have not seen any mainstream video game journalists even mention Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and that is something that would have to be addressed, certainly, as we move into a more digital-only future. Because no longer is there going to be that separation between a video game on a shelf product versus a video game that is digital only. We'll open one more of these. I think this might have been one I would have wanted, because it has a character I don't recognize. And that's what I'm looking for here. If I don't recognize it, I imagine it's a newer card set, and as such, I imagine it's more playable. Whereas the Blue Eyes White Dragon, the Dark Magician cards, you're going to get those if you play enough of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, no matter what. What I feel like would be really annoying here would be if Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I mean, the 2-year anniversary, then also knowing that most mobile games, and this is a mobile first game, only last 3 years. Looking forward, yeah, this would be a good candidate of cards to open. Like, looking forward to that, there is let's open 10 packs here. A real question if they were to make a new Master Duel and replace the current Master Duel, if they made a Master Duel 2 and the cards didn't transfer over. Inherently, they already did do that with Duel Links. In fairness, Duel Links gave you cards in slightly different ways, perhaps gave you more cards and was doing more of a story focused thing. But it's important to point out also, since they've announced a collection of the old Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games, that there has never been a situation out of the many Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games where you have not had to start completely from scratch in every game as far as a card collection, and that just is not going to work for the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is designed and sold. It's sold as you're doing the digital equivalent of actually owning you're doing the digital equivalent of actually owning a card and being able to own it forever. Now, some of the previous Yu-Gi-Oh games, some of the really early ones, had numbers on the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I guess the numbers, if I think about it, have gone away. Let's see, this event still hasn't started. It's gonna start in a few hours, darn it. So we'll just have to play ranked, and that's fine. Yeah. But yeah, there was a point early on in the Yu-Gi-Oh games where you could type in numbers to get a deck that would be playable. That's how the speedrunners who speedrun the early Yu-Gi-Oh games do it, is that they have a strategy of numbers that they type in at the very beginning to get a deck that can be playable for the rest of the entire series of challenges. And some of the most of their very early Yu-Gi-Oh card games are so broken that that's actually doable. Most of the old Yu-Gi-Oh games were very much story-based and focused on starting at the beginning of where the anime series started and ending either with a final battle with Pegasus or one of the Kaiba, or somebody who would have been a big boss. That first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime with the Toon cards and Pegasus, it is fairly different from what Yu-Gi-Oh! Even in the later seasons was all about. It's a pretty far shift. It would have been a very different series had the Toon card concept and Pegasus just existed and stayed forever, and you were just constantly fighting Pegasus over and over and over again, and Toon cards over and over again, instead of them shifting from Pegasus to a more serious bad guy in Kaiba with his blue eyes, white dragons. But I'm pretty sure they knew that they were going to make Kaiba the main bad guy. Although it is a little strange that they didn't succeed in then replacing Kaiba with somebody else who is even a bigger bad guy. They tried that. People didn't really like it. There was a whole filler arc, pretty much, of the board of Kaiba Corp trying to do an internal coup effectively, and so it's just a bunch of boring old business people. And the most recent Yu-Gi-Oh anime I've seen was very kid friendly, so the bad guys that were introduced are very much silly, more like Pegasus cartoony bad guys. I would say Yu-Gi-Oh in itself is just kind of in this weird middle step where it's an edgelord preteen teenager series and games, so it's trying to feel cool, but it's not really going to be cool. And that is certainly something that would have been the mentality back then. Nowadays, I don't know if it's so much that way with certain generations. I feel like if you were into Pokemon when it first came out, you now are a parent who's into Pokemon and who could still be cool with Pokemon, and you're going to encourage your kids to be into Pokemon regardless of what age they are, which is going to then create a situation that shouldn't have done that. It's going to create a weird situation where your kids potentially are just going to be welcoming the Pokemon by so much that they'll encourage people above and below their own age ranges. So we're like right now, I could see 2-year-olds being into Pokemon. I can see 16, 17, 18-year-olds into Pokemon. I just don't think there really is a difference there. Which then highlights how some Pokemon product has to kind of exist to accommodate all those demographics. And that is also something that I think that would only really apply to fairly popular things. Something brand new like Bluey instead might be a good example of something that's kind of brand new, and young kids today are going to be into Bluey, but I imagine 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds are not cool with Bluey. Although it's probably kind of hard to not be cool with Bluey, but oh, could I have activated this? Apparently I could have. Alright, well, let's try something here. Oh, I didn't think that's what that did. Whoops. Just destroyed my own cards. Which that wasn't intentional. I thought that was a card that let me summon one in another spot. So I was thinking I could discard the 1600 and summon it and do another 1600 of damage, which still wouldn't be a one-turn kill. Although here it doesn't really matter. There's basically, unless he has Black Hole in his hand to clear the board completely, there's no way he can win here. He could put, I suppose, a face-down card, if such a thing exists, that can't be banished while being face down. Or he could, which probably would have to be a card that would then be actually a face-up in defense position card. See, I don't know why this guy's even been given a choice. Like, in that instance, there's nothing he could do, so it should just instantaneously force the player into battle mode. That would be the #1 improvement Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel could do, is just improve, speed up things by saying, you know what, you cannot do any action at all. No actions can be taken, forcing the player to the next turn. And not really have to put a pop-up or anything, just make a sound effect, go to battle mode. Do it instantaneously, so there is no delay. For the accountability section today, we'll make it kind of short and sweet. I'm still doing cracking the cryptic puzzles. I did, in between one day, decide to play some of the secondary variety pack samples of the free Cracking the Cryptic puzzles, and because it was just way easier, that did allow me to kind of refresh myself and eliminate some of the frustration I'm having with the super difficult puzzles in the other variety pack, because I'm trying to finish the rest of the variety pack of the first sample pack. But pretty obviously now in retrospect, I should have broken up more of the puzzles in such a way. I'm just gonna quickly special summon here just for daily quest reasons. But yeah, had I broken up the more difficult puzzles with some easier puzzles, that would have helped manage my frustration. But nothing really is addressing what is the elephant in the room there, in that I am just incredibly terrible at these Sudoku puzzles. I actually went and sought out the Cracking the Cryptic YouTube page, which I call the main guy there Cracking the Cryptic, but just because I don't know his real name. But yeah, I watched one of their videos where they were doing the same puzzles as what's in the free demo, and the first puzzle that took me 80 minutes to solve, and it's just because I don't have experience and I don't have any skill at all, so I'm effectively doing what I did when I tried to teach myself Rubik's Cube, how to solve a Rubik's Cube, which is to not seek out any advice. When I did that, I was in school and the internet was not really super available and definitely not that prevalent. The fad of Rubik's Cube solving was definitely not popular there. There had been the initial fad of Rubik's Cubes when they first came out in the 80s, but I was this would have been 2001, 2002, 2003, I imagine, somewhere in the early 2000s, that I was teaching myself, and mostly distracting myself because I was bored at school, in high school, on how to solve the Rubik's Cube and just using it as a fidget toy. But yeah, doing the Sudoku puzzles now is very much like that, where I just don't understand the concepts, and I don't understand or have any practice on the concepts to understand how you go through the process, or how you can jump to conclusions, or how you can train your eyes to zoom down and focus on one of the 81 squares that you should be focused on at that time. In particular, there is this thing that Cracking the Cryptic calls the secret, which is real math when most of Sudoku is not really math. That in the fact that a 3x3 box that has to have the number 1 through 9 in it must add up to 45. 1 through 9 just adds up to 45. So if you have a killer variant of Sudoku, there's potentially a box in there that will tell you the sum of a smaller subset of that 3x3 box. So then you can subtract that killer box from 45 to know what the other spaces would be, which effectively creates a second killer box. There will be a seen one, and then there will always be at least one other unseen box, killer box. In a sense, even if it was a killer box that went right down the middle and split the 3x3 box, you could still add the two on the side together and treat that like a unseen killer box. And so the very first puzzle, and pretty much the very first step to get into that puzzle, should have been using that secret. And I didn't even know that secret, nor had they even mentioned it. So that very first puzzle for me took me 80 minutes. It took the secondary guy who doesn't really do as many videos, it seems, on Cracking the Cryptic, 6 minutes. And they were trading off. So then the second puzzle in the sample pack skyrockets in difficulty. Like, the first puzzle is 2 stars. They don't even cite you with a 1-star difficulty in the sample pack, which is ridiculous. There should be really about 10 tutorial, very easy puzzles that are almost completely solved to start with. Then your real difficulty puzzle should be 2 stars. So there should be about like 10 1-star to teach just basic concepts of Sudoku that are nearly solved. And then the first one that they offer should have been the first real difficult one. And then the second difficulty one is like twice as hard, so there should have been at least 2 or 3 2-stars, and then at least 1 3-star. There isn't a single 1 3-star in the sample pack. So it jumps to 4 stars. So from 2 stars to 4 stars, you'd think the time would double. And it pretty much did, but the range between what Cracking the Cryptic takes to solve the puzzles is just completely different. For me, it took me 80 minutes to solve the first puzzle. It took me 150 minutes to solve the second one, so twice as long. For them, it took them 6 minutes to solve the first one and 12 minutes to solve the second one. They are, I mean, one of two things are happening here. A, I am actually medically diagnosably mentally deficient at solving Sudoku puzzles, which is possible, and I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of people that would be in that case. Or more likely, I would suspect we are in a case where Cracking the Cryptic has just had so much skill in it because they're making the game and they're practicing the puzzles, and they're just doing Sudoku puzzles all the time for years in their life, that they have just gotten completely misaligned from what the real world, what your average gamer would do. Which, noticeably, there is no game that I can mention or think of that has... Oh man, I just screwed that up completely. There's no game I can think of that has a Sudoku secondary minigame as a way of having you do something, or as a way of just having some following action, in the same way that Skyrim has its lockpicking mechanisms, and every Bethesda game has a lockpicking mechanism. What does this do? That's one material to target one face-up material and destroy it. That's Trident. Oh. So I was thinking of a different card, wasn't I? Did one of my cards get banned? This one? No, it's not that the cards have changed. Whoops, I should have activated that. It's not that the cards have changed, it's that I've just slept enough that I'm not recognizing the cards by their icon. I've kind of forgotten what the icons look like. So yeah, I just think cracking the cryptic is off the rails from what your average gamer is, which makes it a weird situation in that the cracking the cryptic apps and the Sudoku apps on Steam are a niche on top of a niche, in the sense that they will not ever really appeal to your average gamer, and that's a shame. Like, really, you would want to see Sudoku be involved, although in fairness, if I was going to make a game with Sudoku in it, I probably wouldn't try to be the best, knowing that Cracking the Cryptic's YouTube page alone is probably already got that audience, where people can just passively watch him solve Sudoku puzzles and just do Sudoku puzzles on a website or on pencil and paper, because nothing really is ever going to stop you from just pausing the video at the very beginning, writing down the starting positions, and then doing it on pencil and paper. And honestly, pencil and paper may be just as good as even Cracking the Cryptic's app, the app called Cracking the Cryptic on Steam game, because there's just an infinite different ways you can mark things, and there's a limited number of ways you can mark things in any digital game, and I've found that there isn't quite enough different ways to mark things in the Cracking the Cryptic app, or there isn't quite the best way. The biggest problem is that you can't just have a digital equivalent of a save state or a transparency piece of paper where you could take the current state of the puzzle, take a transparency over it, and then trace all the numbers that you want to look at, so you can then test a scenario to see if the scenario works. You either have to do that in your head, or you have to have empty spots that you haven't filled in yet to use as a place to write things down. Neither of which of those concepts really work. But in fairness, any suggestion I think I could make is still not going to address the elephant in the room. That I just suck. I really suck at doing these Sudokus. So I'm hoping that I'm not 100% wasting my time, and somebody does just enjoy seeing somebody solve it very slowly. If I were to do Sudokus instead of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which is what I was thinking, but is almost certainly not going to happen, because it's taking way too long. Like, I've got Yu-Gi-Oh! Down to slightly over an hour. If I'm doing one Sudoku puzzle per stream, which is really the bare minimum, 4 hours potentially on some of the higher, more difficult puzzles. 4 hours just doing the Sudoku, and then another couple hours to look at games and news. That does not work for me. That doesn't work for anybody unless it just got me a huge amount of watch time. But I definitely don't want to commit to that always, because then you are just hitting Twitch streaming levels of overworking yourself, or you're streaming 8, 10, 12 hours a day every day on Twitch to hopefully just get enough concurrent viewers to get monetized to try and get something to happen there. It's also worth pointing out that there have been way more stories of people leaving their exclusivity with Twitch, even the biggest Twitch streamers, Pokimane being like the most recent one. So if there was a concept of a PewDiePie equivalent on Twitch, I would know that person, and the fact that I don't know that person highlights a problem. Dr. Disrespect, I guess, was the big name that I remember from Twitch, and he left Twitch, and then I guess he went to YouTube, and then I think has since then been mostly forgotten. So yeah, I have about 4 probably super long episodes left on cracking the cryptic to solve. I still want to also go to Sudoku Universe, go back to Sudoku Universe, and cheat my way using a walkthrough with just all the solutions to getting all those achievements, which I'll do that. And then there's just a level of inconsistency going up a little bit, I think, for the short-term future, and possibly that will connect to the foreseeable future. So at any point I might be late or just totally miss a stream day. And there is always a possibility I would just at some point completely stop streaming and disappear completely, which I guess that's true for any streamer. So any streamer could be hit by a bus or have something happen to them and they would just stop streaming. And while I'm very happy for the larger watch time, I also noticed from the last video 3-4 minutes on average instead of 30 seconds on average. Like, I appreciate that, but the watch time still, on average, if you're only getting 3 or 4 minutes, it is just me setting up if you're starting at the beginning. But perhaps the clips are working somehow, and they're just not reporting that they're working correctly, because the reporting tells me that there's basically been nobody, no, the reporting so far, as far as I've checked, it says nobody's seen the clips at all, which is fairly believable because I don't really see a way in which that couldn't be the case. I guess what I could have done here is slightly different. I could have cleared the board, and then that would have put 2 in the graveyard. Maybe I should do that next turn. Clear the board, then summon this. And then there would be 3 things I could get rid of. Yeah. As far as the other things I did, kind of meandering and wandering, trying to see what the next thing I will waste way too much time is on Amazon Prime. I'd like to catch up on Curb Your Enthusiasm, but that's all HBO Max, and so I don't think I'd be willing to just pay. HBO Max is probably the best offering if you're paying for individual or small groups of shows. It's probably better than like Apple TV Plus, which they did announce a 2nd season of Severance there, but if the 1st season ends on a cliffhanger, I imagine the 2nd season will end on a cliffhanger, and maybe they'll focus on it a little bit more because they don't have Ted Lasso anymore. But it's going to be the slow progressing show, and maybe it'll get 4 or 5 seasons and then wrap up, and so it's almost certainly better to have the entire series be done first, and then Yeah, I can just win here, so I'm not gonna do anything more. Yeah. Once the entire series of Severance is completed, then I'd like to watch it. Of course, if everybody does that, the entire show will just get cancelled. Honestly, I don't know how far you really can go with the concept of Severance. You're pretty much on the second season going to have to delve deeper into some other secrets other than the and more weirdness, and you are going to potentially just have a Lost-like experience where they're going to tease a secret and then tease another secret and tease another secret, and then at the end of Severance everybody's going to end up going to heaven, and that the whole thing or most of the thing was a dream or something like that. But yeah, I watched the movie Strays on Amazon Prime. It's a very raunchy movie that's fairly slow. I feel like I may have already even said this, but I'll say it again just in case I didn't. It starts very slow and it ends with the main protagonist dog and a group of his stray dogs like beating up the abusive dog owner that owned the main protagonist of the dog originally. But they don't really imply that that's what's going to happen at the beginning, and so it's very much a we're on a road trip type movie with the odd twist that it's dogs on a road trip than just humans. And I don't think all of the comedy fully works or is fully connected. The first half of it definitely feels like it's just skits, and here's something funny we thought would happen, and the movie itself does kind of come off with the idea that Will Ferrell was this was probably people working out of their home offices during COVID time doing voice acting from comedians who really aren't the best choices, I imagine, for voice acting for CGI dogs. There's almost no humans, very few humans in the movie. So it does also feel like a movie that could have been mostly made without any voice acting at all, which probably isn't a terrible way to make a movie if you're gonna go that way. Strays is basically The Secret Life of Pets, but if it was dirty. And I imagine The Secret Life of Pets, I think I saw that. I think that was way funnier as an idea, because The Secret Life of Pets is targeting kids and playing within the restraints of kid entertainment, where Strays is targeting, I guess, stoner adults, or young, probably stoner adults, which is a much smaller audience. And the spoiler for a movie that shouldn't really have spoilers is the main protagonist resolves that he's going to go back to his abusive owner and bite his dick off. And that should have been hinted at, and if not foreshadowed, from the very beginning of the movie. And then I would also say in the late part of the movie, the more relationship stuff happened a little too late when the relationship stuff probably should have happened in the early first act or early second act at latest. Particularly since it's dogs, and dogs already naturally have a pack mentality and work together. It's not crazy that they would have gotten through that part fairly quickly. But yeah, I found that ending just like surprising. That's not really what I thought where they were going at the first half. And halfway through the movie, I guess they also introduced this plot line that a Girl Scout is missing in the woods, and so the thought there would have been, oh, this is just an offhanded explanation, and the fact that they come back to it and it kind of somehow plays a part at the end. It feels like the whole movie was written backwards, that we've got some conclusions, let's write backwards to get to those conclusions, but then they could only write well enough to write backwards for a certain level, and then the very first act just is missing that setup. So I do think I'll probably be wasting some of my time on Amazon Prime watching some movies more than trying to get into a TV show. I've kind of exhausted all the old sci-fi shows, and inherently I am, I guess, trapped into the old sci-fi channels mentality. That there really aren't a ton of new sci-fi shows worth watching, whether they're on the Sci-Fi Channel or the better ones on which are not on the Sci-Fi Channel. Sci-Fi Channel does have Surreal Estate instead of Real Estate, Surreal. But the main protagonist actor there is pretty awful, and he didn't get any better in the second season. So the series feels rough because of that, and I don't think the second season was as good as the first season. The premise of having a real estate company that is specializing in haunted houses is going to run out of ideas fairly quickly. And then you can talk about things like Severance, which is also a sci-fi show, but it's on Amazon Prime, so I mean it's on Apple Plus, and so it just doesn't have that same feeling, particularly when you're jumping between multiple streaming services to get to that. I would be watching some of the Star Trek things if I didn't have to pay for Paramount Plus, but because I have to pay for Paramount Plus, I would have to pay for Paramount Plus. I don't. I'm not going to get into any of that. Yeah. So you're missing out on that. The Super Bowl happened over the weekend. I did not watch any of it. I'm not a fan of NFL or American football, or really any sports. I could probably sit through some highlights of some sport, but it wouldn't be just American football. The Super Bowl doesn't really affect me much, and I don't think it's going to affect too many people much anyways, because there's already a case where I should have really sent this one back, because I'm never going to be able to play that, where there's just fewer and fewer people actually watching live TV for that to really be a concern. Let's see. So what I've been trying to wonder is there a way to do 8,000 damage in one turn? Because that's what one of the secrets is around. And I guess we can do it. We'll just attack with this and then attack with this. So I need Zeus on the field in a second turn win, or a multi-turn win at least. Then I need to get that up to 5,000 and attack secondly with that. And so that should have made progress towards doing 8,000 damage. Even though the reward here is over 5,000 damage, not over 8,000. There's, I believe, another reward if you do 10,000 damage in one turn. But maybe there's a reward for doing over 6,000 damage with one attack. Let's keep on playing. I guess we're gonna get into the news pretty quickly. Otherwise, because I really don't have anything else to say or talk about. There's potentially going to be a lot of stuff I just can't talk about, which is going to take a lot of time, so I can't be as much of an open book as I'd like to be. I can talk about my macro, I guess, and say in making the clips, again, I'm uncertain. I'll just have to double check whether these clips are getting any views at all, or potentially getting any views. It may very well be a case, since YouTube's algorithm is just this black box AI artificial intelligence that's just as crazy and stupid as any other artificial intelligence. Even people at YouTube don't seem to know how it really works. So it's very possible that it has been told that if something has a clip, it should promote the base video that has a clip attached to it more. So potentially I might be getting more views literally just by making clips and having absolutely nobody, I mean exactly 0 people watch the clips. Which, if that's the one cool trick to succeed at YouTube, at least for the moment, I will take it. But yeah, the last stream worked fairly well. I don't know if the timing is perfectly right. It might be a second or two off in making the clips, and frankly I just don't care that much. If it's within 60 seconds of where the clip should have been, I think that's fine enough. It should be at least within 15 seconds of where the clip is, because the clip will be 15 seconds long, so you should get either the very end or the very beginning in the worst case scenarios of what is being talked about in that clip. But my program had been programmed, hadn't been optimized to not make duplicate clips. So when I would be on one web page and then start talking and then stop talking, then start talking again, it would just make a second clip when I started talking the second time. And that's not the desired way for it to be. So I've tweaked the programming. Hopefully I tweaked it correctly and it will work today, so that I won't have to go into the comment separated value file and clean up the file. But I'm not sure. Well, I'll only know after the stream. And yeah, there isn't a perfect way to implement it, but my other program to check videos and have just the video that you just recorded launch, so you can check to see if the audio was good, if it actually recorded. I think I've gotten that pretty much fixed as far as it had this problem where in OBS you record as MKVs by default, and then you can remux, effectively re-render it, reformat it to an MP4. At some point, I suspect OBS will support AV1 encodings inside of an MKV file, and then there will be some update where YouTube will start to want AV1 files and AV1 videos in MKV files, and then at that point I would stop making MP4s. There is some assistant programs I have to edit videos that I, on rare occasion, need to use that are built around MP4 files to very quickly split a video and merge a video. So I would need to find AV1 encoded MK4 versions of that. But then I could certainly just stop with the remuxing. It would save not really any amount of time that would matter. But yeah, at the current moment, to finish my thoughts, I have it programmed. I have an advanced scene switcher program made so that it will wait a certain number of seconds. What it does is it starts a number. It starts with 0 and increments it by 1 for every few seconds, every like 100 seconds or so that I've been recording / streaming. And that, because that means the file is bigger, that means it will take a little bit longer to remux and re-render the video. And so it's just making an artificial number that is very much going to be specific to my computer and my hardware. And so you would just have to tweak that number for your personal hardware. If you have a really slow computer, you would have to bring up the number. If you have a really fast computer, you'd have to bring down the number. Actually, you might have to do the exact opposite of that, the way it works, because it may wait a certain number of seconds before it adds the number, and you may need to reduce the wait if your computer is slower, and increase the wait if your computer is faster. How many things should we destroy, I guess? Like this tier limits deck in particular. It's just gonna keep coming, isn't it? Screwed that up. Screwed that up pretty badly. So yeah. Ideally what you would want to do is you'd want to get a signal directly from OBS in that program and not just have to guesstimate the time that it would take to render. Which, anytime you're programming something and you're just guesstimating, you've crossed that line from pure logic to just trying to get something finished, just trying to get a finished project. Yeah. The same thing to get back to video games is the problem with cracking the cryptic too, is it definitely feels like for me and my struggles, there are times where I could just start guesstimating numbers, and you could just put in a number and find out if it works, or if it doesn't work. Although in Sudoku, if you really just pick the top left number and then you guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 until one of the numbers was accepted as being correct through the cracking the cryptic out, the knowledge of that being that number in the top left may be completely out of order of the knowledge and the logic that you should be following, the logical path you should be following to solve the rest of the puzzle. So inherently, if you just guessed the top left box, you probably then are going to have to guess the top right box, and you may straight up just have to guess all the boxes. So you really just aren't going to learn anything. I guess the move here is to go for Zeus. Let's see if this works. We'll summon a little bit out of order this time. That way can't activate that. Well, if I can't activate that, maybe I can't activate this one today. We shall see. See, if I was to throw like this tier limits in here and then try and activate this to banish that tier limits card, I don't know if that should happen on my turn. Okay, so he's activating my ability that then deactivated my ability, so I've just lost. Like, we can potentially try to activate this anyways, and we might as well just potentially try and activate it a second time. We'll see what the result does. Nothing. Nothing. And we lost. So I think very clearly in that case, I should have activated it on my turn. So he couldn't have activated that other card. And see, now we're in a weird position where if in the next hour this unlocks, I'm not going to really be motivated to play it. Here we have a Year of the Dragon, Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. Yep. I've been calling it Chinese New Year lately, so I've forgotten that they tried to make it more of a Lunar New Year celebration to include many Asian countries that don't want to be associated with China, and I guess that's fine. So overall, lifetime, deal 8,000 damage in a single attack. No, I didn't make any progress there. So I have no idea. I'd have to find some card or some loner deck to really do 8,000 in a single attack. And it's no surprise that I haven't done this very often. Although weirdly, take control of your opponent's monsters, I feel like I should have done 100 times by now. Then winning on your with a first turn kill is pretty difficult. I'm surprised we still haven't finished banishing your opponent's cards. There's a lot here. Mostly though, the Duelist level is the weirdest thing. I really should be at like Duelist level 50. But we've got like 2 daily logins done because I'm continuously now running Yu-Gi-Oh in the background to have background music for the Cracking the Cryptic app. So February will be a good month as far as just getting all these rewards. Not that getting all these rewards changes too much, it just gives you a little bit more gems. So the new festival will probably launch with some new daily quests, but otherwise there's nothing else to do here. And this new Duel Pass is already very quickly hitting at the 1/3 way point, or at level 30, 33 out would be about 1/3 of 100. And there's never been an issue with this battle pass one way or the other. It's just like not anything you really even need to consider about or think about unless you're just not playing any Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you're not playing any Yu-Gi-Oh! Then obviously don't get the battle pass. Alright, so let me just reload my Twitter real quick here and see if there's anything new that I want to talk about. Neil Mohan, the new CEO of YouTube, is talking a lot about trying to help content creators make money, partners make money in particular. And here's an interesting picture of Neil Mohan here next to several people that I don't recognize, and would have to assume that these are kind of rich people that are more in the background, CEOs and board members, or just random people in general, content creators maybe, but not PewDiePie or The Rock. Noticeably though, it is interesting to see a picture like this compared to Susan Wojcicki, who really only would talk about people like the celebrities or The Rock. Yeah. And was definitely trying to rub elbows with celebrities. But also say Neil here is not really trying to look that impressive. You've got a button-up shirt, but no tie. You've got a belt and jeans. This lady by far is dressed more fashionable, whereas everybody else is rather dressed down for an event. And then the next picture here also is he's saying a collab is coming with Ludwig Agren, which I think he's a content creator. But again, just very casual. You got a t-shirt and a sweater and a zipped up, half zipped up hoodie, jeans. Ludwig here is very casual too, and just doing like an awkward show. This might actually be he may not be a content creator, come to think of it. He may be a film director from the Fallout TV series, because this kind of feels like this could be that stage we saw with the Fallout TV series, which then I guess collabing with the director would be rubbing elbows with celebrities, sort of, but it's still not going way beyond what is reasonable, like The Rock. The other big news that still is not actual news yet, I think the announcement may be made later today, or at the very least later this week, as far as this event, is the rumors and speculation around what Microsoft is going to do as far as hardware, or letting more games be multi-platform, or getting out of the hardware business completely, which is another speculation that people are putting way too much weight into. And we can see here from Video Games Chronicles, the headline says Phil Spencer has reportedly reassured employees that Microsoft won't stop making Xbox consoles. If he actually used the word Xbox consoles, that also might hint that they're still going to use the Xbox branding, which there's also speculation that it would just be branded Microsoft Gaming. Although I think they've already kind of gone in circles with that, and that there was a push for a small amount of time to have Microsoft Gaming being the branding. That way they could, or PC Gaming, Windows Gaming would have been branded as Microsoft Gaming and then not Xbox. But there's been far more momentum over the years to label things on Windows PC as Xbox, even though it's really not involving an Xbox. And I think Xbox, frankly, does work better than Microsoft. Microsoft means nothing positive in most gamers' minds. It's just, oh, that's the company that forced me to go to Windows 11 when I didn't want to, that forced me to go to Windows 10 when I didn't want to. And otherwise, Microsoft is either a complete unknown, or it's promoting business services like Microsoft Azure, which means nothing to a gamer either, or Microsoft Word or Excel, things like that. Microsoft is the boring software productivity software company. Xbox is the cool gaming company, even if they are the same company. But yeah, I think rumors and speculations have gone out of hand, and I suspect some of this isn't just because there was one too many rumor that came out of hand. I suspect a lot of this is that gamers in general were satisfied and had their time taken up for the month of January because they had gotten games from around Christmas and they were just playing those new games, not relatively brand new releases, but they were catching up on older games that they would have gotten on Christmas. And so there was just this saturation that compensated for the fact that every year the month of January has no new announcements for games. So my thought is that satisfaction, that satiation that gamers had because of Christmas basically runs dry just about in February. Like February 1st, people see that second month, day one, and they say, where are our video games? And since there are no video games, then they just say, where's our video game news? Where's our speculation? Certainly all of that. And I think there is definitely a lesson to be learned here to say that if you're a video game company that's as big as Microsoft, you need some kind of announcement that you can put out to happen before February 1st. Something to just reassure people that they're making games, reassure people that you plan on doing video game business in the year, for the rest of the year, and something just to get hyped and talked about. And yeah, there definitely is room, and my personal thought is that there should be something like a video game show, You have like the video game awards potentially could happen in January to cover everything that happened in the previous year, and that would keep gamers busy for a while. But it would also, at that point, allow you to announce at least one game and tease an announcement of at least one game for companies like Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo. Like at least one big thing that you can look forward to and be hyped about every year. That would be the ideal way I think it should be done. But if you just don't even do the video game awards part, just a Microsoft Direct, a Sony Direct, a Nintendo Direct in January, instead of a end of year review, here's what we're thinking about in the next year presentation. And yes, there is certainly a level here that gamers are just bored and they are rampant and they will just feed on rumors like crazy, and that is in part just how gamers have been trained to expect and react to announcements and rumors, in the fact that they really have not been given enough news that is based on fact. Year round, there's just way too much speculative news articles, quote unquote news articles, that aren't really news. There is possibly another tinfoil hat theory here, in that some employee or former employee or group of employees or former employees who may or may not be working together is actively trying to sabotage Xbox, Microsoft. I could see that happening, and frankly it could be from any point. If it's like Xbox's formerly known Phil Spencer, formerly of Major Nelson, if there's something really nasty going on behind the scenes there, Major Nelson could be leaking things, or he could just be flippantly not caring and leaking things he knew or that there had been in discussions before he left. More realistically, though, it could be any random collection of employees at Microsoft subsidiaries that have been laid off. They could be leaking things. The less tinfoil hat conspiracy thought is it could just be people like Jeff Grubb, mainstream video game journalists, who are trying to build entire careers around leaks and announcements in an industry that really doesn't have that many leaks or announcements. So he may be just pushing rumors that he's hearing that he can't really confirm and are not 100% are not likely to actually happen. We are still very much in the same spot and will stay in the same spot until the announcements actually happen. And the announcements, I imagine, won't be much. There is an elephant in the room with Microsoft that they should do something about, in that Starfield, the user base for Starfield on Steam has dropped by, I think, about 92% is what I saw from its peak. So nobody is staying with Starfield. Their first update that they should have rushed to get out did not maintain enough of an audience or add any content that would make it interesting to grow an audience. And so then what are you going to do with Starfield? Like, on one hand, you can trash all of your research and development in Starfield as a game series and just cancel it, since there's no name established for it, which would be kind of the default response. Or you could try to do the Destiny route on it. That's more of a single player game though, so I don't know how you can really justify that other than to just try and create some good word of mouth and hope that the sequel would be better. So there's, I guess, a middle ground there where you don't make Starfield completely free to play, but you instead severely reduce it to $20, often going on sale down to like $5. I don't think a subscription service makes any sense for Starfield. But yeah, I think Starfield going to be more of an MMO, going with a free to start or free to play style, could work fairly well for Microsoft in general. Maybe it doesn't work particularly well for Bethesda or ZeniMax, but Microsoft owns ZeniMax and Bethesda. But yeah, if they can take what they have learned and had success of Lord of the Rings Online, and then say we're going to do that with Starfield, that's yet another game that Microsoft Azure servers could utilize and highlight as far as here's an MMO running on our server technology, and here's an example of how this would work. It also would then allow Starfield to go into a different direction and try something different, whereas it otherwise really is just Skyrim in space from what I've heard. So if that was the big announcement, is that we're going to go multi-platform on with Starfield, and we're going to make it an MMO or make it free to play, that would be an interesting twist that nobody is discussing. Redfall is the smaller elephant in the room. Same problem. Like, that's a game that they tried to make an MMO and really didn't go anywhere with that. I think for the case of Redfall, you can just ignore Redfall though and never mention it again. Otherwise, Microsoft is going to have to just continue to do layoffs. I mean, that's really all it's going to come down to, is that for one reason or another, either really bad management, and it definitely looks like it might just be really bad management at Microsoft and its subsidiaries. There's been way too many games that have come out bad from Microsoft, and even games that come out pretty decent are just not selling as well as they would like them to sell. So them going multi-platform in a lot of the games makes sense. But I don't think they're going to pull out of the hardware market, and I'll end it there. I think even if it is just kind of closer to a niche far third selection console, that they're going to make something to put it out there. And ideally, what we'd like to see them do is make something that is much closer to a Steam Deck and much closer to a gaming PC, and really embrace discs and say, you know what, we were just wrong with this disk driveless future idea, and we recognize that there will be always an audience who wants physical media, like, because there's constantly stories of digital stores deleting games, and if that was the case, that Microsoft kind of just said all of our consoles going forward will have a drive, we plan for them to always have a drive, then the Xbox consoles could be this niche console system that people who want to keep their drives for historical or collection reasons will always go with Xboxes. And then particularly if like PlayStation eventually goes digitally only, which I think at some point PlayStation would do that. Although what would trigger PlayStation to go digital only or Nintendo to go digital only would be more of like, there'd have to be yet a longer pandemic or another pandemic happening in Japan. Company video game stores that sell new games and trade old games and resell old games would have to go out of business, which I could see that happening. I could see several of the major video game stores just shutting down and going out of business, and then all those games would not really sell and everything would be just digital. But I don't see that happening in Japan for any foreseeable time. It seems like it would be maybe the next generation of gamers in Japan might embrace that. And if they did embrace digital only in Japan, and Japan just modernized around that, then you probably would see Nintendo and Sony get rid of their disc drive. But that's like maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now when that would have to happen. And at that point, Xbox could come back and say, we're going to bring back the disc drive. At a certain point, I could see the Xbox being a lot like an analog pocket device or something that can play old discs, old Game Boy cartridges, the analog pocket can. So making an Xbox console that is designed to play original Xbox discs through hardware emulation or through actual hardware, no emulation at all, might be appealing to a niche audience. And frankly, all of them just need to embrace probably a larger Blu-ray UHD standard and USB or Thunderbolt connectivity directly to the consoles, so that you can just make consoles that don't have a disc drive built in, which is kind of not necessary, and instead you just buy a separate accessory and plug it in the first place. Moving on with the news. See if Neil Mohan has something else I want to talk about. They announced this vertical live. They didn't really say too much around it, and I think they're still in the process of implementing it, but effectively what it is if your resolution on your cell phone is in vertical format, portrait format, you can live stream on your phone, I guess, now in that format instead of it having to be widescreen. If that works for you, this is clearly just trying to emulate TikTok and other apps like that. Theoretically, I guess you could probably do the same in OBS on a computer and stream vertically. I would have to struggle, though, to really figure out why I would want to do that. Although it would perhaps mean I could shift over the automated process of making YouTube Shorts on Twitch to streaming that process on YouTube. But honestly, I don't see a reason to do that. Like, I feel like on Twitch you can get away with garbage content like that, where you're just streaming my macro running over and over again and making the YouTube Shorts. Whereas I think I'd just get terrible views if I did that on YouTube, and that would just hurt my channel in the long run. And honestly, I guess I should think about what is hurting my channel in the long run even now. But yeah, unless I was playing a very specific video game that was vertical in the format, I don't see a reason why I would ever do vertical in that way. If I specialized on a specific game, something like a DDR game that is more vertical, and that I'm just playing that all the time, that would make sense. This, I suppose, would let you not have to put a whole bunch of banner and side art if you are doing a vertical game. But overall, I don't think that helps for most content creators, but it's nice to have more options. Apparently, also CNBC says that YouTube stars helped NFL bring in more viewers, according to the NFL League. I think somebody kind of major at the NFL also retired. I think I heard something about that during the Super Bowl. I walked through a room where someone else was watching the Super Bowl, basically, and heard that. But I don't think that's going to change how NFL does things too much. I would imagine we're going to see increased NFL on Amazon Prime unless Amazon stops funding putting live football on their Thursday Night Football on their Amazon Prime service. Which, take note that the second Major League Sports of any sort got involved with a streaming service, in this case Amazon Prime. The second that happened, Amazon Prime announced that they were adding commercials back into Amazon Prime and effectively trying to convince people to pay more to gain more revenue. They also had raised the rates of Amazon Prime. They're doing that pretty much every year. It's going up a little bit more, it seems. Or it's averaging out to about every year it goes up a little bit more. Which that has always been the problem with cable and cable TV, is that the major sports that draw the general public's attention way more. People who watch TV and watch broadcast TV over the air or over cable, they by far are watching sports, whereas streaming services really felt like they should be completely separated from that. They just by default were completely separated from that originally, and so the stream service like Netflix felt like it was targeting several groups of smaller audiences, but smaller audiences nonetheless, instead of trying to just become a boiled down collection of content that will appeal to the majority and not appeal really at all to those previous niche audiences. And yeah, Netflix has ruined that concept too. The idea that Netflix would have been the cool kids club, now the cool kids club has been forced by the school to let everybody in, so now it's just the average kids club. There was something to be said about being a niche or targeting only certain demographics. Netflix getting all of the WWE Raw content, and so that will be the mainstream quote-unquote sport that Netflix will have, where Amazon Prime has NFL. Hulu, we have no idea what Hulu is going to be, but I wouldn't be surprised if Hulu definitely tries to get some kinds of sports, maybe a collection of lesser sports. It's surprising that I don't know who would have like FIFA and soccer games broadcast. Somebody should be targeting that. Somebody should be targeting basketball. You could certainly on Hulu get things like poker, billiards, and have several different smaller sports. That's what I would try to do if I was in charge of one of these streaming services, is just to see, can we make our own poker show? Can we make our own billiard show, our own darts show, and just have a large collection? Or can we get the streaming rights to the smaller billiard room style sports? At the very least, if nothing else can be done, can you just make up a ridiculous sport and try and promote it? That would be more innovative, frankly, if Netflix says we're gonna invent pickleball version 2.0 and turn it into a TV show and promote this like a real sport. Netflix in particular could have, on their mobile phone and their gaming focus, they could make a poker game where real people are playing poker, and then the results are getting live streamed and you can just play along. It could be like 1 versus 100, which, man, if Microsoft announced that they were bringing back 1 versus 100, that'd be great. But I think they did announce that, and either it came out and nobody cared, or they announced it and it never went anywhere. But yeah, Netflix could do a 1 versus 100. You play the game on your cell phone, you install the app via your Netflix app on your cell phone, and then the results are time delayed, maybe a little bit, or straight up just live broadcast to the Netflix TV show. Then you have that an idea of Netflix owning 2 screens at the same time, and owning somebody's attention in 2 different ways, because they could be watching themselves being live streamed as one of the players in a table in a giant tournament of poker, while also looking at the video game screen on the phone actually playing the poker. So that would be something Netflix uniquely could do, whereas Amazon Prime Video has not gone into games, and I could see them going into games, but they'd have to actually work on that. They haven't done that. Moving on video games news, I'm just sitting here with this headline from GameDeveloper.com and not even talking about it, and this will just be a really long stream if I allow myself to just keep rambling. There's an obituary here from GameDeveloper.com. The League of Geeks co-founder Adam Duncan has passed away. Adam dedicated himself to his beloved craft, and we considered ourselves so incredibly lucky and forever grateful that he transported us all to the beautiful worlds he dreamed. So here we have a picture of him, and the fact that this is the picture that they found of him working in his office, and there's literally somebody that's being cropped out on the side here and not even standing next to him. He's just sitting here, unless he couldn't stand, which, I mean, that's not a wheelchair, that's just an office chair. This is once again an example where every single business should just have a professional photo of everybody in like a suit and tie, that there should be an annual picture day type experience where pictures get updated and people look really nice. You just bring in a professional photographer and just have them do photo shoots of all the employees, and then the photographer maybe tries to sell prints. Most photographers do try to sell prints to make their money, but also maybe just gets paid a lot more to do photo shoots with adults. But yeah, this isn't awful, but I mean, sitting down in an awkward pose, leaning over, tilting your body a little bit too much, just a printed t-shirt and a hoodie, and it looks like there might be a smartwatch here, which is kind of visually distracting, and then hand on thigh, and then lady here just not even being cropped out properly. There literally would have been no problem here. You already have black bars on this image because it's not a proper resolution. Maybe this is a case where this was posted to some website where the picture had to be more squarish. I don't know, but even in that case, you could have tilted the camera, you could have moved where you were standing. It seems pretty clear that this image originally did include this woman, and if that's the only picture you've got for an obituary note, then yeah, just crop it more. There's nothing but unimportant stuff here. So yeah, if this was the picture that you were showing people at a funeral, it would be completely unacceptable in my book, and so it's just as unacceptable in an obituary. I don't know what the League of Geeks is. Apparently it's an Australian studio. Do we have a general idea of how he passed? He's yet another young looking person, so it could be several things. Could be suicide. It often feels like if they don't say that it very possibly is suicide, and or COVID. Although if he's in Australia, I would also throw in the general assumption that he may have just been killed by one of the many dangerous animals in Australia. Spiders, kangaroos, vipers, things like that. But yeah. This might be a case if he was a founding member of the League of Geeks. They're calling him a founding member to just say he was hired when League of Geeks was formed, but he seems to just have been an art director, concept artist, and animator, which makes sense. Seeing this tablet here, which I question, a chair like this, and then leaning over and drawing on a tablet like that. That's probably how he liked it, but you can also see his monitor in the background here is tilted more, so he definitely is coming from a higher angle when he's drawing. But yeah, I kind of would like a link when I see League of Geeks to link to their website to know what games they've actually worked on. Otherwise, I just have a name, a name of a company, and a name of a person. Which, yeah, I guess that's all we get. So let's just move on. Same old rumors still from Video Games Chronicle. Xbox reportedly bringing Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment to rival consoles first. Interesting. First would be weird, certainly, to say here's two games coming to PlayStation or Switch before even Xbox. I could kind of see that happening though if PlayStation just wants to waste their money and pay for a timed exclusive on a game. Microsoft probably would make more money doing it that way, and Microsoft could certainly take the backstage and say, you know what, we're not about timed exclusives, and we're not about play it first on Xbox. We can just be about Xbox Game Pass and embrace the gamers who have realized that there's plenty of other games to play on Game Pass, and playing a game late isn't really that big of a deal. Particularly now, if Microsoft does it very strategically and says the non-online games, the single-player games only, are really the games that are going to be timed exclusive to Sony. Games that aren't likely to be really that spoiled anyways. Like, I doubt there's going to be anything majorly surprising happening in the Indiana Jones games, and I don't think the Indiana Jones games are going to have any kind of multiplayer element, or so it being a timed exclusive on PlayStation to give Microsoft more money than it coming to other consoles like PC, or even just coming to Xbox as a potentially free game with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. It still works for Microsoft. Microsoft gets money every month that you stay subscribed to Xbox, so if you're just staying subscribed to play slightly older games, but you're always getting some kind of new game to play, that might work for them too. Xbox could be just time shifted by 6 weeks to 6 months behind the releases of games on the PlayStation 5, probably not so much on the Nintendo. I imagine Nintendo's not going to pay Microsoft for any kind of timed exclusive. And Nintendo's exclusives and system sellers are pretty much always going to be Nintendo first-party games, first-party published games at least. If Microsoft could get into that situation, though, it may have a problem of diminishing hardware sales. Just every month, people making the decision to not buy an Xbox because there's not any tentpole first-party games or system exclusive games, I guess it would be, to make you buy an Xbox Series S or Xbox Series X. And yeah, I don't know how Microsoft can sell hardware if they're not doing exclusives, which is kind of the problem with the game industry in general, is that the only way they're selling hardware is on the assumption that system exclusives are the thing and the reason people buy specific consoles. Yeah. I don't know how Microsoft could get any kind of boost at any point of extra hardware sales unless PlayStation just runs out of stock. Moving on. Silent Hill: The Short Message has been downloaded over 2 million times. Since it's a free-to-play game, the number really could be much higher than that, but it is also a horror game, and I don't think too many people are aware of it. It could definitely have been advertised more, in my opinion. It was released on PlayStation last month, and I think it's still a PlayStation exclusive. So I would say Silent Hill: The Short Message is kind of an example of a game that would not sell any hardware at all because it's a horror game, because it's just a free demo. So yeah, had they put that game on store shelves, I don't think that would have helped its sales either, selling either PlayStation hardware or the discs themselves. But since it's a free-to-play game, since it's in the horror genre, 2 million is definitely nothing to scoff at. I saw this thing that apparently this is an old remedy that people just don't remember, as far as boiling and mixing salt, not table salt, but like Himalayan sea salt or rock salt, into a glass of water, a small amount of salt, and then gargling or drinking the salt water to dehydrate the germs in the back of your throat and reduce congestion. And so I tried that yesterday, and apparently you're supposed to do it when you first start getting congested, which I think I'm always congested. So, and you're supposed to apparently do it every 4 or 5 hours, and you're supposed to leave the salt at the back of your throat and not drink water to dilute it, or eat food to dilute it. So you're just really gonna dry out the back of your throat, which may be intolerable. But I tried it yesterday, and I do feel like it may have worked a little bit. I feel like hearing my own voice feels a little bit smoother, and I may have coughed a little bit less. So maybe a daily regimen of that, or a weekly regimen of that, or just as needed, might help me quite a bit. Because yeah, when I stream, I do get into coughing fits. I do feel like there's a lot of congestion overall in my life, and yeah, a lot of times I think it's allergies, but the allergies could maybe be corrected. And I seriously doubt that there's any major danger there either of having a little bit of salt water in the back of your throat. Yeah. I imagine it might extremely slightly raise my cholesterol and salt levels, That'd be about it. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle has an article here that says the Helldivers 2 developer says games in general, I guess, need to earn the right to monetize, which is an interesting concept of a phrase, certainly. First of all, I don't buy into the idea that corporations are people and that corporations should have many, if any, rights. So once you use the word right in almost any sentence, it's such a loaded term that means so much to some people and may mean something completely different to other people. So you have to kind of dance around that. But ignoring that and just a general concept, that I kind of do agree with that products need to be good enough to then ask for money, not that products can just be shoveled out there and you can ask for money first and then there's you just deliver absolute garbage. In the real world though, there's a long history of people putting a fancy box on a shelf and then the product inside is just absolute garbage, or doing entire infomercials trying to sell you garbage products and then you getting the packages shipped to you to find out that they're unacceptably poor quality. So it's not just a video game thing, it's really a capitalism thing, is that you inherently become better at capitalism the more you can charge and the less you can spend to develop a product, and that inherently tends to mean that the most successful capitalists are charging high prices and spending very little, so you're getting very little for your money. Yeah. So yeah, but as a general sentiment, I get what they're saying here, and it's good. It's the right thing to say, even if you're just paying lip service publicly. The video game developers need to be in that more gracious mentality and not be in a mentality that's like, I'm a great game developer and everybody should be forced to buy my product, which is very much the kind of mentality that I think a lot of game developers have, and frankly a lot of businesses have. But yeah, if more game developers started that way, then they would focus more on quality, and since video games are very much forms of entertainment and art, quality needs to be extremely high. When you look at the massive amount of garbage on Steam, like it really highlights where the need to earn the right to monetize mentality should be applied, instead of seeing terrible RPG Maker games trying to get 69 cents, $5, $10 off of people just making awful asset flip adult games that are just the same old match 2 card game over and over again, or jigsaw puzzle game over and over again. And there certainly is a different scale when you look at games on Steam too. If you're the first person to make a jigsaw puzzle game, the quality on that jigsaw puzzle by comparison can be really, really low to what the millionth jigsaw puzzle developer needs to make. You need to make a really, really good jigsaw puzzle on Steam to really make most people, make me personally, feel like there's a reason why anybody would buy that. And in contrast, if you're making a relatively good first-person zombie shooter game like Resident Evil early, and then the market gets flooded with less and less quality first-person zombie shooters, the price is going way down, and the right to monetize is getting removed effectively on zombie first-person shooters because there's just such a flood of them. And yes, somebody even now could make a good first-person zombie shooter, but it's going to have to advertise itself and spend more money to just get people to play it and see it and not compare it to all the garbage, which is always how I feel, and it's my concern around Steam as a storefront in general, is that if Steam was a real brick and mortar store, if there was a Steam building and you could go into that Steam building and that Steam building had every game it had available for sale as a DVD on a shelf, would it make any sense at all in an actual physical building to have that many garbage games on the shelf next to good games? No, it wouldn't. It would be insane. You would have like Halo, and then you would have every single Halo clone in between, hundreds if not thousands of Halo clones, and then you'd have Halo 2, and then you'd have hundreds of thousands of Halo 2 clones in between. Just the physical action of browsing the shelves, it would be ridiculous. And we see that in real world discs games, that Walmart increasingly is using less and less shelf space to hold disc video games, and there is decreasing amounts of what Walmart even would shelve. Best Buy is rumored to remove all physical media video games. That seems to be their plan. GameStop's they're the only company in town that still really is selling disc games, but even GameStop is not including every single game. They're constantly doing clearance bins of older games, and their stores are not going to magically get bigger, so as there are newer and newer games, older and older games need to make way. So yeah, and on that thought, there's another thought certainly here to think on that level, to say that games as they get older may straight up lose the right to monetize, particularly if it's a game that has online services and the servers have been shut down. Obviously you're losing the right to monetize at that point, but if it's just an old game in general and it's just not relevant, like, people aren't going to buy it, and that it's just that case. And remakes, remasters, or continued content can make that happen at a slower rate, but eventually it probably will just happen. And that is something certainly around the idea of remakes and remasters that we're not seeing, and it's something we've never really seen as far as DLC, is that all DLC has always been designed to keep people playing in the launch window and play longer. No DLC, or very little DLC, there's been a few, I guess, big DLCs that have come out a year later and added new content, but we don't have like Super Mario Bros. 1 Lost Levels being added by Nintendo decades later, when you could do that. But instead what you have is a new Super Mario Bros. Game that just homages the first game as it is. There is a theoretical alternate universe where Super Mario Bros. 1 came out, and instead of making Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3, they simply made add-ons to Super Mario Bros. 1, and people would have just continued to play Super Mario Bros. 1 as a game that just grew and grew and grew over the decades, and even today there would be new content being added to Super Mario Bros. 1. Now we know in the real world that didn't work. Mario Maker 2 would have been that example of making new content, and even Mario Maker 2 is not really being supported by Microsoft. We also know that even in the past, while that was kind of tried, it didn't work, in that Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 was then adapted and changed into Sonic and Knuckles 1, 2, and 3, where you had an attachment device to those cartridges of Sonic 1, 2, and 3 that would add Knuckles as a playable character into the games. But yeah, that was very much a gimmick for the Sonic series and on the Sega Genesis, and it was not done, I think, for any other Sega Genesis or Sega games. Moving on, the Dead Cells designer has said that the decision to stop updates is a quote a-hole move by the former studio. Sebastian Bernard, let's name the exact person instead of just calling him Dead Cells designer, claims Motion Twin statement is quote marketing BS. So he sounds angry, using fiery words, and yeah, I'm not sure I 100% paid enough attention to the announcements to make it certain that it was a case that nobody was going to work on Dead Cells, but it definitely felt like the general assumption is that with Motion Twin leaving and the other company leaving development, they definitely weren't naming a new company to work on it. This is probably a great example of a bad breakup and not how to be professional and magnanimous, but it also is probably a rare example in which you can get away with that and maybe get yourself some applause by being on the side of the gamer. Although it may very well just be a cheap pop that people look through and doesn't actually do anything for you. I don't think since this does pretty much sound like sour grapes, it's probably not worth reading the entire article, but we can see here Sebastian Bernard was the co-founder of Motion Twin, so he's probably upset on how that broke up, and he worked at the studio for 19 years, which is way too long to work in one place these days, but also nowhere close to the 30 to 40 years they expect people to work at in some cases, during which time he designed Dead Cells. I don't know if that means it's inherently his baby. I guess it is. Following the success of Dead Cells, Motion Twin wanted to continue to update it while still moving on to the next project. In 2019, Motion Twin established a new legally separate studio called Evil Empire, which was then handed the responsibility for working on Dead Cells. So the company split up effectively, and they pushed it onto a B team to work on Dead Cells, and now Evil Empire is not working on Dead Cells. Interesting. So there's more to this story, and this is kind of a great example of, even in doing my best possible effort to understand all the stories around video games, they get so complicated and there's so many of them, it's hard to off the top of your head remember what would happen. So now Evil Empire, this legally separate spin-off of Motion Twin, is going to be pursuing a new project, and then Motion Twin seemingly has not been doing anything they can announce in the meantime. While Motion Twin's statement appears to be the result of a joint agreement in development of Dead Cells update, Burnett has posted a message on the official Dead Cells Discord server that implies he believes the deal was less than amicable, which I wouldn't be surprised. Having the quote here, I guess we are going to read the whole article because I am intrigued. He said on his Discord, in part, Having seen firsthand the actual situation behind the scene, I can honestly say I'm glad to not be part of this anymore. The official statement is total marketing BS, and the way the situation happened is on a whole different level. So he's implying that Evil Empire was basically fired from the project by Motion Twin, would be my guess. I've never imagined my former co-op studio, is co-op really the right word there, would turn it to be such greedy people. I wish the absolute best to Evil Empire for their next things, and I hope people working there will survive this sudden economic cut. So it seems to me he's implying that you kind of have an Activision Blizzard situation forming here, where Motion Twin is the Bobby Kotick and the management, which would have been Activision, I believe, in Activision Blizzard, and they are just kicking around Evil Empire, which would have been more the Blizzard people. Although in the case of Activision Blizzard, the names and changes and people involved have changed so much that really the remainders of Activision Blizzard, now owned by Microsoft, is nothing close to what the Activision of its heyday and the Blizzard of its heyday would have been. And that may very well be the same case for Evil Empire and Motion Twin, is that even if it is still the same people, they may have just changed in personality and mentality. There is an argument to be made here, and I'm talking way too much, around you work for somebody for 6 months, a year, in a work environment. A lot of people think you know that person because of that, and people, maybe people don't change, maybe that's the wrong phrase to say, but people go through phases, people go through stuff in their life, people just change the way they feel about people and how they react. And often the BS that is spouted that the workplace is like a family and everybody's in it working with each other and there's no competition and that there's no aggression, a lot of that nonsense that's spouted does subconsciously, I think, affect people into actually believing that nonsense, and then they get disappointed and surprised when you have a coworker that stabs you in the back, or coworkers that change their stance or start acting very differently. I imagine Gabe Newell probably thought very differently about how the other members of Valve, when Valve was first formed, would have acted and would have been, and Gabe Newell is probably acting very differently himself now, years later. And Valve, I think, has almost certainly changed quite a bit amongst what the relationships are there and how people act and react. People do just kind of change. They get in different positions. They have to try different strategies. They just get irritated and bored, frankly, of dealing with the same people over and over again. Which, yeah, the random nature of humans and their moods and behaviors is a major problem with the concept of running a business or running any kind of project, and might be solved very easily with just automation and artificial intelligence, but then that leaves a lot of people unemployed, so you have to address that issue. But yeah, if you told me that you could make, say, the F-35 jets that they build, if all of that could be done by a robot with a level of perfection, from design to final production, all of that could be done with robots and AI, and no human had to be involved at all, that would probably mean F-35s would get built faster and slightly better, slightly more consistent. And so yeah, if your goal is that you just need F-35s to build up your Air Force, and you don't care about the fact that nobody's getting paid, in that process, and you don't care about the fact that it might cost a lot of money to initially develop the AIs and robots, that would be the right move. Of course, that also is a great example of where a sci-fi future of war might go, in that you might have countries that literally can just automatically generate drones without any human hands touching the drones, launch the drones to go and bomb or shoot people in a different country, and then just continue to make more drones. The cost of war there might become very, very cheap, down to the point where you could have a country that is run by a single person and a giant factory of drone making robots, and it could just constantly be at war with any other country until one factory gets destroyed, or that one last person that's connected to the factory dies. And that's assuming the factory itself doesn't just automatically continue the war even when there are no humans left and no reason to be at war. That has nothing to do with video games, though. There's a episode of something, I don't remember what, some sci-fi show. There's kind of like that. It wasn't drones making war, though. It was like a giant Amazon facility. There was a Futurama episode like that too, which is constantly sending out packages, even though there aren't any humans that want the packages. Moving on. GameDeveloper.com has a similar article here. Helldivers 2 defies the studio's expectations after selling 1 million copies. A concurrent 360 players across PC and PS5. I kind of wish I knew what Helldivers 2 is, however. It seems like it's doing well, but it also seems like it just doesn't have as much coverage about it. GameDeveloper.com says that Nintendo says the Super Mario Bros. Wonder soared due to multiplayer magic. Around half of the people who played the game do so in multiplayer modes. I didn't even really know Super Mario Bros. Wonder had multiplayer, but it definitely is a direction to go. Like a 2D Super Mario Bros. Game, or 2.5D Super Mario Bros. Game, is now what Super Mario Bros. Wonder is. It is a game where you have collections of Yoshis you can play as, and Nabbit, and Daisy, and Princess Peach, and Toadette. And looks like there's maybe a Toad, Blue Toad here, Yellow Toad here, Yoshi's. I don't know what this little bird is, though. But yeah, it is no longer the Super Mario Bros. Of just Mario and Luigi, and maybe their girlfriends and Daisy and Peach. It is now this longer collection of a group of friends, and when you have so many groups of friends, it definitely makes sense to have multiplayer, in that two people can be playing at the same time to solve the levels, whether it's local multiplayer or online multiplayer. And this may very well be a case where this is a game that is very much still mostly played with local multiplayer. And I would say, at first thought, I don't think it really hurts Super Mario Bros. As a series to always have multiplayer. If the very first Super Mario Bros. Game let you play as both Mario and Luigi at the same time, running and jumping, it would have been a better game if they had programmed it that way, if it could have worked that way. And I don't think there's a single Super Mario Bros. Game where that isn't really the case. Now, when you get to late levels and hard levels, you kind of need some assistance there, otherwise one character will just fall off the edge of the screen and die over and over again. You need the little bubble and the respawn stuff. But they've been working on that and figured out most of that. There is, I suppose, a slightly bigger question whether Super Mario Bros. Is just going to increasingly be that one weird game that nobody plays anywhere as much as they do Super Mario Odyssey and the 3D platforming games. But yeah, I think we'll always have something called Super Mario Brothers. And perhaps, in particular, I'll say Wonder perhaps did a better job of not overemphasizing the gimmick. Like that you can turn into the elephant. Notice the elephant isn't even in the screenshot. Or the cat suit was in a previous game, and that was perhaps too much of a gimmick too. I think because they had younger Nintendo employees work on Super Mario Bros. Wonder, they tried to pay more of an homage to the old games instead of trying to just introduce a new gimmick. And that might be a problem in general, is that you might just have Shigeru Miyamoto always wanting to stand out and do something new and innovative in every Mario game. And really, because Mario is very much heavily based in nostalgia, a small gimmick, a small twist is all you really need in a game. And maybe you don't even need that. If you just made a new game called Super Mario Bros. And it was just a remake of the original Super Mario Bros. In this modern art style with multiplayer function, I think that might sell pretty good too. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says that Sony has heavily discounted the PS5 Slim in Europe for the first time. It's knocked off £75 on the console's price, but some retailers are offering even greater savings, which, okay. This highlights that the PlayStation 5 Slim or fat version with a disk drive have been in enough short supply that there was just no reason to discount it. And right now, a discount is probably just to boost sales numbers for this quarter, because now is not really the time that I think people are going to heavily buy the PS5. Although there really should be a sales period like a Black Friday around the summer period when school is getting out in the United States, but that period is fairly inconsistent on exact dates, and so we don't have anything like that. It wouldn't make any sense to have back to school sales in which is putting video games on sale, and a lot of summers are summer breaks for schools that do have summer breaks, whereas I think a lot of European schools are year-round or have much shorter breaks. But even in the United States, summer breaks can often be not that long. Sensor Gaming still putting out posts, quite a few, although some of these are not full videos. Yeah, they're saying in the final version, in the Japanese version of Final Fantasy VIII, Zel's favorite food is not hot dogs, it's pan, written this way. Pan meaning bread, but could also mean things like flavored breads and pastries. So this symbol here is written right here for pan, and then it is localized to do you have any hot dogs left, question mark, which is definitely just another example of localization and stupid localization. It's possible that whatever they get handed or whatever is in the background art looked like a hot dog and maybe that was a choice, or maybe it's just a case that somebody decided hot dogs sound American, so let's use hot dogs. Even if you were it's censorship in the sense, in this is what I'd probably call it light censorship, in that they've localized it into the wrong kind of word, whereas the direct translation that a purist might want to translate it to "do you have any bread left" might sound a little weird, because nobody's going to just have bread as their favorite food, but you could have said donuts, which donuts are still very American, would be a better localization choice. Or you could have said pastries or flavored bread of any other sort. Toast, even. But yeah, hot dogs are a meat-based product, usually, unless they're vegetarian, and they are a two-part product in that there's a breaded bun and a meat wiener, and usually a lot of other toppings added on top of that, or at least ketchup or something added to it, ketchup or mustard. So the translation's really off. And this definitely highlights just the level of flippancy that localization has been in the past, and it has only gone from being flippant to, in some of the worst examples, being downright antagonistic in the way some games are being localized, to actively censor things, to actively change the meaning of things, and to actively add in entire sentences and statements that are just, or sentiments that are not in the original game. As another post here that says that the 2002's Time Splitters 2 censored the game's violence in Japan, despite the fact that the Japanese version features an exclusive warning message about violent scenes and grotesque expressions. Which, yeah. I think in general, if you are seeing an exclusive warning to your country, you probably also should assume that there is some level of censorship also happening there. I don't think any ratings board is just going to approve a game because you add a warning. None of the ratings boards are that generous or that kind. It is not particularly helpful either if you're getting a warning but you're not getting direct disclosure that things have been censored. Censorship in video games, in particular in Japan, has been fairly prevalent, in that they don't like to show gore, and they sometimes change the color of blood. And in general, I would say Japan is probably less interested. The Japanese audience is probably a little less interested in seeing gore and blood compared to what the Western gaming audience has been trained to. That being said, you only have to look at some of the violent, gory, bloody animes like Berserk is a great example to show that there is an audience that wants to see violence, gore, and blood in Japan. Berserk was very popular, at least as manga. And then Censor Gaming did put out a video for talking about the Stellar Blade creator discussing its character designs. The quote that he highlights here is, "This is entertainment for adults." The people working at Shift Up, since their two previous games definitely are also adult games with scantily clad anime waifus and big jiggly button boob physics. I mean, this is their bread and butter, and this is what they've come up succeeding in, and what the people in charge really want to make. So it's definitely a good statement to say, hey, you know what, we are standing out because we're making an adult game for adults. We're not trying to pander to be family friendly. We're not trying to be kid friendly in any way. The problem, though, is this still is going to be released on the PlayStation 5, and I suspect something at some point in the line is going to be censored. And it'll be interesting to see if Stellar Blade comes to any other platform in a different format from the Sony version, or if whatever the standards that they had to internally agree upon with Sony, that level of censorship that would have happened, whether it's self-censorship from Shift Up saying we know the rules of Sony, so we know we can't go too far. Notably, in these two screenshots, there's actually very little skin showing. It's just really skin tight clothing, so you can argue this is a fully clothed woman robot lady. But when you particularly are animating things, you can make the impossible skin tight latex catsuit type costumes where every single curve and angle is being glued together onto the body of the robot in the digital format. There is also the danger, before I move on here, that we'll just never know what level of self-censorship there is and what level of censorship was applied by Sony, and that's probably for the better. It's probably better to just not see the sausage getting made. The other scenario I think is worse, that we get rumors or releases, or somebody comes out and admits that Sony straight up told them they have to censor certain costumes, and as such we now have the specter of censorship being the conversation around Stellar Blade, instead of Stellar Blade being potentially an example of what adult games could be in the future, and could be the game that proves that there actually is an audience there, and that more adult games should be made, and not just adult games because they're lewd. There's, I think, a marketplace for more adult games, even in like Halo, where Halo Infinite is perhaps a little too family friendly, even in its current state, and maybe Halo should be just a little bit more brutal, like Gears of War, and a little bit more bloody. Maybe it should have evolved with the age of its audience a little bit more. But yeah, you definitely have this odd dichotomy in that Asian game censoring blood in trailer, Korean Asian game owned by, in part, owned up by Chinese company Tencent, or in part, not so far admitting to any censorship, then Western game being censored for violent and grotesque scenes, and then Asian game being localized and censored in the West to be more American, which that is definitely the oddest of the combinations there. I mean, it just seems like why you would have even spent 5 minutes to think about changing it instead of just directly translating it. Which, by the way, I found out that Google Sheets can directly translate text. It's kind of hard to do it perfectly, but it seems like it works well enough. But it definitely seems like sometimes it's translating word for word or phrase for phrase, and potentially if you just add the word the, the, in English, so if you're saying eat the pizza and then you translate that to like Spanish, you'll get one thing. But if you say eat pizza and remove the D, you get a different thing. So it's more literal translations, where a localizer and a more of a natural language program would probably say, what is the smoothest, most normal way you would say eat pizza or eat the pizza in Spanish. And yeah, but the fact that your Google Sheets couldn't translate at all is kind of cool. I don't think Excel has that function powered by Bing. It would be surprising. And then we're almost done with the big news, and it's not really even been that big of a news that day. Switch 2, still calling it Switch 2 even though there's been no confirmation of that, will reportedly feature a custom NVIDIA chip, which this rumor's already been around, so it feels like Video Games Chronicle at this point is just going in circles with their announcement. This does, however, highlight a few things looking at the screenshot. I'd totally forgotten about the grip. I don't even know if you got the grip when you got the Switch and I just put it somewhere and forgot about it, or if you have to buy the grip separately. But yeah, they definitely were at some point trying to promote the idea of the grip here as the potential controller you would use. But then they released the Gamepad Pro, so obviously the grip didn't really work. It's also kind of interesting how they have effectively just light pipes in the grip. This is not an LED in the grip. This is a piece of plastic that reflects the LED that is actually built into the Joy-Con itself. Definitely building to make the cheapest product possible. But if you took off the Nintendo Switch logo here and here and got rid of the grip and ignored that, this is kind of what I would like to see as far as a Steam Deck Lite. Something that is really just a tablet screen and could be used as a tablet screen. The size, there's a rumor that the Switch 2 might be 8 inches, so it might be fairly larger screen. 8 inches on a tablet screen seems to be about the minimum you would want a tablet to be. Otherwise you're getting into just some really small, like, ebook reader type device that really should just be a Kindle at that point for better battery life. But yeah, the idea of not really having rails, although the rails idea is not terrible for detachable controllers on the Steam Deck, but just generally not having the touchpad or the buttons sold, and you could just buy a tablet PC that has the Steam Deck operating system and is going to get that same level of support for a cheaper price, would really appeal to me. And then the trade-off, of course, on that is if a Steam Deck Lite was a real thing and not just something I'm making up, it would have to be a kickstand type thing that you kick out and put on the table, and you would just have to carry your controller with you wherever you went, which maybe then the Steam Deck Lite would come with a carrying case where you could shove a controller in that, whether it's a PlayStation or an Xbox controller, which that's fine too. It still would be way cheaper to not put in the touchpads and the buttons and then make a carrying case that is that has space for an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, or even Joy-Cons if you can connect to Joy-Cons. But yeah, also I think, and this again is just me making up the idea of a Steam Deck Lite, it would be something for them to sell this Black Friday without feeling the need to make a Switch, a Steam Deck 2. Yeah, and it would be something you could compete with against a Switch 2 if you came out with a Steam Deck Lite. So I guess my random prediction out of nowhere, or that I think would be cool, is if we saw Steam announce a Steam Deck Lite very quickly. There's really no reason to drag your feet, other than maybe Valve just doesn't have enough people working on hardware to develop a Steam Deck Lite. But the concept of having a light version of a portable console is pretty established by Nintendo, and Nintendo is pretty much the only player in portable consoles at this point, so aping that idea makes a lot of sense. What doesn't make sense is Insomniac Games here putting out this tweet on February 12th, halfway through the Black History Month. If you're going to support Black History Month, you should be putting out tweets on the first day. So yeah, that is weird. And certainly it is still just like all of these walls of text, paying lip service and pandering. So there was this tweet. It actually came out February 10th. Let's scroll down and see. We are seeing a whole bunch of Spider-Man stuff and nothing on February 9th. So it's not like they're putting out daily notifications around Black History Month. Clearly, all the budget and all the focus is around advertising and promoting your products, which is fine. Just don't try and pretend like you're a company that cares about people. Then we're getting to February 1st, February 2nd, and see, we have no idea when they actually changed the logo, so I have to assume that was also February 10th. And here we have a completely different image on January 31st, and then it's still Spider-Man being promoted. As far as February 1st, nothing happened. So yeah, you might as well have not put out anything at this point. You're so far late. I could see putting out something on the 2nd or 3rd if it was over the weekend and you wanted your announcement, your wall text, your pandering to start there. It's also notable to say that at least one of these video game companies that pretends like they care about black people said that they were going to put out posts highlighting and celebrating black people, and I have not seen any post highlighting or celebrating black people in the video game industry or outside. So that seems to have been proven to be a lie. Let's see. So then, let's very quickly go through the games that would have been out on Friday that I'll make YouTube shorts on. Inherently, because I am making clips now, I'm just going to get further and further behind making YouTube shorts. It's not like I'm getting better at making let's reload the Lunar New Year and I guess claim the daily rewards while we're here. Yeah, I heard somebody tell me that the Japanese actually don't celebrate the Lunar New Year, which I didn't think that was the case. I thought it was very much more of a case that they may not make it the biggest thing ever, but they probably make some dumplings and maybe give some red notes of cash. But then if that was true, then it would certainly explain why there aren't anywhere as many Japanese games being listed here. I wouldn't be surprised if it is also kind of inconsistent that if the Japanese are angry at the Chinese, they won't celebrate Lunar New Year, but if they're not as angry with the Chinese, they might. Regardless, that sale still doesn't really catch my attention. Neat Girl Rehabilitation Plan. Looks like it would be more of an adult visual novel, but once again is not in the adult section, which I guess for the time being I've just given up on the adult section content. Maybe 2025 it would be the point that I might go back to looking at adult games, but if I am going to get to the point where I have a more regimented schedule, going and looking through the adult games and pre-curating them would take too much time. And see, that's inherently what's happening here, is more and more things, if done properly, would take time. This game is out now. here's a great example of a game that ignored that concept of developers must earn the right to monetize. Early access for $2.09, English and Chinese garbage game. I don't think it has in-app purchases though. It's just an in-game currency. Fake currency. Same could be said for that game. Same could be said for this game. Yep. At a certain level, you can't really wish for it. Here's Helldivers 2. Let's go ahead and reload this to see if we can get some updated information. Yeah. Mostly positive, 75% positive with 30,000 reviews, which is a lot of reviews. And 24-hour peak on Steam of 155,000 players. It supports Japanese interface and voice for customers in Japan. Interesting. They didn't license the other languages, which it has quite a few, to Japan. That's almost certainly a censorship thing. That there's something said. Helldivers 2 looks like it is a bug shooting game. So a better version of Earth Defense Force, relatively speaking, which has been the thing I've always asked for whenever I saw an Earth Defense Force game. But it is also an online co-op game, so if you don't want to engage with online co-op, you're not going to have any content you can play at all. Too bad. It's also being published on PC by PlayStation, which really doesn't mean anything to me. Yeah, so I guess I still am in a situation where the Earth Defense Force style of games where you're shooting bugs and still doesn't really have a good rip-off, a better version of that. I'm gonna say no to this. I'm gonna start just increasingly holding Survivors clone games to a higher standard. And there definitely were games before Vampire Survivors where it was a top-down game that you were getting attacked by hordes. I mean, I think that's exactly what a Gauntlet game was. So it really just is a testament to how terribly the branding around Gauntlet has been, that the Vampire Survivors could just steal the branding from Gauntlet. Gather your friends. So here you have like some kind of presidential politics game, but it's anthropomorphic animals, and I would assume that there is no major references being made here. Yeah, if anything, it seems like it's a card game turned into a digital format, so I'll give this a chance. But we are in this weird situation where anything that even looks a little bit like American politics very quickly can just derail and become some kind of insulting pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-Biden, anti-Biden, or just pro-Republicans, anti-Republicans, pro-Democrats, anti-Democrats game. And I just don't want any of that in my life. And even a simple card game around loyalists and leaguers, which is what that seemed like it was, may still be too politically themed for my interest. There is interesting Outriders here getting 71%, but overall down to 60%. There is a problem. It's pretty obvious to me that there's a problem here where I'm spending extra time making Sudoku video content when I should have been playing much shorter games with much shorter episodes and scheduling videos, and I'm just distracting myself from other things I should be working on, whether it's rearranging my macro as far as the news stories, doing fall list cleanup, or working on my Smart On Air sign, which I just stupidly gave up on and backburnered. And when I kind of desperately need to at least give that a valid shot and get it to a product that's actually available for sale. I have wanted a Krampus game or a Krampus movie that was good. So far, I don't think I've heard of any other Krampus games or any Krampus movies that were good. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of any other Krampus games at all. Inherently, though, I guess the problem can't be addressed because it really is just a fact that I'm always feeling like I'm falling behind, and that feeling is encouraged by YouTube in the fact that YouTube isn't you're not successful on YouTube unless you spend a ton of energy and a ton of time on it, and in general you're not successful in life unless you're spending a lot of energy and a lot of time on something, unless you get really, really lucky. Unfortunately, lucky, the phrase lucky defines that it won't happen to everybody. Here we have a very bloody bathroom. I'll give that. We're still seeing a lot of horror games that could be something or could just be nothing. You have that extra value around horror games that you could make a walking simulator game in a horror haunted house, and it would just have that extra feel to it, whereas a walking simulator in a forest would be incredibly boring because you just see a bunch of trees, and I don't think anybody wants just there's a small market, I imagine, of people who do just want a walking simulator where you walk in a beautiful forest, but it's not a game that would have much action or interest to it. Here we have another one of these Spanish-only point-and-clicker games, and there's so many of them, it seems like. Maybe that's the problem as to why they're not bothering to translate any of them to English, is that it is just such a problem. We may be at the point, I'd have to double check this, that the ScumVM emulator could run these games now, and that's why they're showing up on Steam. But there might also be a artificial intelligence translation API that ScumVM could use to translate these games to English. Inherently, I think it would be fairly easy to translate a game like this, an old point and click, into English. Just go through the process, but it's not going to be free, unfortunately. You would have to pay somebody to do the work, but it is absolutely the case that as a fan of point-and-click adventures, if you told me here's an old point-and-click adventure that has already proven itself, a series of point-and-click adventure games that have already proven themselves well enough to be popular and have several sequels, so you can just play them back to back. That's pretty much everything you would want for a fan of old point-and-clicks. Whereas any new point-and-click game, of which there aren't that many that are made and released, has a risk of never getting a sequel or just not being particularly that good quality. I'm seeing more games here that seem like they are at least plausibly good. Of course, a military shooter like this could just be an asset flip game, and it's practically impossible to tell from the screenshots. Inherently, I think what would probably speed myself up is if I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh, these pages just popped up in front of my face automatically, and I just had to deal with them as a pop-up. That it seems like that would work. Do I want to give this a chance? No, I don't think so. Of course, it would also be incredibly annoying if I'm in the middle of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And about to win, and then a thing pops up demanding my attention, and that would make pretty poor, I'll give this a chance, it would make pretty poor quality content overall if that was the case. That's gonna be no. That's gonna be no. That's gonna be no. Then we are basically done here. And I don't want to go any further, because if I go any further I'll trigger the wrong banner at the top, which that's the reason why I need to just spend the 5 minutes it would take to move the macro around and move how the pages are opened. Alright, so where are we now with 24-hour peaks? Palworld has dropped slightly below Dota 2, which is what I expected would happen. We're seeing a trending downward, but there will probably be a floor it hits, so I wouldn't be surprised if for weeks and months, if not years, you'll still have 400, 300, 200,000 players. I wouldn't be surprised if Palworld, for the long haul, will be in this top 16 space. Meanwhile, I don't see anything else that I even really want to bother to mention, so we'll leave it at that. And then my chart here, assuming things are accurate, we're seeing a bounce back up after a fairly large drop from PUBG, and I would say almost certainly everybody from here to here, or almost everybody from here to here, is coming back from Palworld, and a bump up in Apex Legends, a bump up here, and then Arca Blade Point. Got a data sample here. Still seems like overall the number of players is trending downward, and I suspect we will just see an overall trend downwards in the top few games as new games come in and people try new games, and as people are specifically in school. Maybe we'll get a bump in the summertime, but we probably won't see a major bump until, let's see, maybe a Steam summer sale at most. Then it probably would be something around October. Let's see. We have a full page advertisement here for Rockstar Games, sales up to 70%. That's probably the best deal you would have gotten. And then let's play our game here and see how far do we have to scroll to see Palworld, since Palworld does still seem like it's a big thing. Palworld is not at the top here being highlighted, but Helldivers 2 is. A Steam Remote Play Festival is apparently happening pretty soon, later tonight. Got some, also an RPG Maker Festival, which, yeah, I couldn't imagine as a content creator I'd ever want to buy RPG Maker games to try to even find the best of the best. I'm frankly just a little too close-minded on that. And yeah, how far do we go before we see Palworld? Monster Tiles, Tower Defense, top sellers, we can see Palworld that way. So yeah, we didn't see Palworld before the fold at all today. Which, in all fairness, the algorithm probably shouldn't just advertise itself to me all the time. So I'm going to click on the RPG Maker cell, and then I'm going to click on this. And let's see. Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm going to open a GTA 5 Premium Edition. I don't think I own GTA 5, so GTA 5 Premium Edition literally only costing $15 is not a bad idea. But then Card Sharks seem to be what they're promoting. The bundling in the depiction here is very weird, and the assumption has been in the past that we would see a full black background on Steam. This is gonna be an interesting example of what Valve and Steam would look like if they eventually do get to a full black background. Apparently this is a third-party event presented by Rockstar Games, so Rockstar literally just paying to have a publisher exclusive sale and have nothing else promoted. I would say the black background is a little rough here. There's a little bit of a shadow on this side, but then there are definitely some spots here where it feels like the image is just bleeding directly into the background, which maybe is what you want, but then maybe you don't have a little bit of edge shadowing too. But no, you don't want it to bleed into the background. You're going to have a white border line of some sort around each box and each edge to try and connect things if you're going to have a black background, or at least a light color. Doesn't particularly have to be white. GTA 4, the complete issue here for $5.99. Then you've got some Max Payne trilogy games, which, yeah, LA Noire is probably the only Rockstar game I have, and LA Noire in VR. $6 for LA Noire is not bad. Manhunt for $3.49 is a game I do want, but it's also mixed reviewed. And at some point I bought Bully, and I guess I haven't done anything with that. Yeah, inherently I never could get around to playing Bully because Rockstar's not going to make a Bully 2, so there's just not a relevant reason to spend the extra time to play Bully Scholarship Edition when I would have to then compare it to basically some other GTA game, and that's it. So let's evaluate these games now on Steam. Does not support Vista 7, Windows Vista 7 or 8. 24-hour peak of 98 people playing it, but that's not not terrible. Manhunt here is at a 2-year low of $3.49, so that's reasonable. Max Payne 3 is at a 2-year low of $5.99, so I think we're gonna see what's happening here. If you bought the full bundle, it would be 70% off for all 3 games. I can't middle mouse click. This is at a 2-year low, but this is actually only 65% off, so the complete bundle is probably a better bet. And Max Payne 1 is 65% off, and and that's at a 2-year low also. So your best bet would be to get the bundle. That'll get you another 5% off of 2 of the games. $16 plus $3, you're spending about $20 there. GTA 5 Complete Edition is at a 2-year low. Not record low prices, but pretty low. Important updates to Grand Theft Auto 5 and episodes from Liberty City. We are making a number of changes to make sure players who own the game can continue to enjoy these games. Starting in 3/19/2020, we'll replace both GTA 4 Complete Edition will replace both GTA 4 and GTA 4 episodes from Liberty City, which is currently digitally available. The following services, however, will not be available: GTA 4 games for Windows Live, multiplayer mode, or leaderboard. So it's basically a single player game for GTA 4. Do we think that there's a possibility that they're going to make new remakes or remasters for GTA? No. I think there's just as likely a possibility that Rockstar is running low on money and just trying to bolster sales before maybe they even go bankrupt. Although, in fairness, if Rockstar did go bankrupt, I don't know who could buy them and who could do any better by the GTA series. With the failure of the Saints Row reboot, I think that's more of a hint that nobody really wants to play these types of games. They're not entertaining or unique enough. Now, this one doesn't have a history from SteamDB, but look at the list of games there. The record price here for the game itself would have been $9.24. This is selling for $14.98. So I wouldn't say GTA is really in a good position. See, all the torture and sex scenes have been altered or removed, patched, none that I could find yet. So apparently there was a whole bunch of torture and sex scenes in GTA 5. I don't know if that's accurate, but maybe. Yeah, that might be a case where they were just assuming or there were rumors of such things existing. GTA is definitely in that weird situation where it's selling itself as being edgelordish, but in reality can't be that edgelordish. And while you have very positive reviews on Red Dead Redemption 2, I don't think you can get Red Dead Redemption 1 on PC. I don't think that there's a real fandom for the overemphasis on in-app purchases and online PvP. I think they overemphasized that, and that made Red Dead Redemption 2 less of an experience. That being said, you can't really argue with these high reviews, so Mob Rule would say buy this. The question, I guess, then would come down to you're at an all-time low. Really, you're a penny off from the all-time low if you just buy the game. The question is what's in the Ultimate Edition that's not in the main game. Let's see, Ultimate Edition, here it is. The Red Dead Redemption 2 Ultimate Edition still delivers all the story mode content from the Special Edition plus additional content from the online, including bonus outfits for your online character, rank bonuses, Black Chestnut, Thoroughbred, and free access to the Survivor Camp theme. Plus get free access to additional weapons in online. So there's literally nothing in the Ultimate Edition. They are just completely misusing the phrase Ultimate Edition in this case, when that is clearly online content. So 1980 there, not a bad deal. And then RPG Maker Festival is also just a third-party event presented by Gotcha Games, which would explain why there would be an RPG Festival. And I guess Gotcha Games is probably the development of RPG Maker in general, since these multiples of quote-unquote software is being promoted to make RPG Maker games. And that is kind of the problem inherently, is that most of these RPG Maker games are being promoted in part by the person selling you the products to make an RPG Maker game, which is just feeding on itself to make more RPG Maker games. That being said, I can't say I've done a perfect job of 100% avoiding RPG Maker games. There's a few here that have enough relevancy that it does deserve to be. There are a few games that deserve to be talked about, deserve to be owned and played. The rest of these, however, are not really catching my eye. There's a weird thing here, certainly with RPG makers in particular, in which you could have a really good story and the visuals just wouldn't back up the story. And so there could be some confusion here. Looking at this trailer for this game, this does not fully look like an RPG Maker game. Doesn't scream RPG Maker games. There's most of these thumbnails pretty obvious that they're somewhat low quality. There's for limited time they're offering RPG Maker XP, which has given birth to numerous masterpieces for free. Take the opportunity to open the door. So this is probably the very first game, which, sure, why not? I'll click on that later. Yes. We'll open the link. Yep. So this would have been in 2005 when we started to see RPG Maker start. And you can just add it to your account for free. It's pointless that you click that button though and it goes to another page when really you should just stay on the same page. But yeah, for the people who would use the software to make a game, of course they're going to sing the praises of it, particularly in 2005 as far as other game engines, or game engines you specifically can find on Steam, noting that Unity and Unreal I do not believe are actually available on Steam. Obviously this would be considered pretty good because there's not that much competition, and certainly it's presenting something that gives you some art, gives you some sprites, gives you some characters to start with, whereas Unity and Unreal is just going to give you a very confusing, complicated interface, and then you're going to have to go to some kind of asset creator storefront to get more content. And see, I don't know if this is a case where my ad blocker is just blocking a bunch of stuff, or if there literally is only 2 games as far as new products that are being promoted and only a few games here that are being promoted. And then you have to get way over here, I guess, until you start to see just random games that maybe are newer that have been allegedly made in RPG Maker. Some of these newer games do seem like they are trying to have more varied imagery, although you can look at like this game from 2017 being highlighted and nobody even bothered to update the thumbnail, so you just have these stretched out thumbnails in that case. Yeah, increasingly the thumbnails though are becoming better quality, which is just becoming trickier in the sense that you are still, in many cases, just being given a garbage RPG Maker game. So I'm trying to look here and give these games a chance, but I don't really see anything here that's changing my opinions too much. Even if it was just like an adult game like Cage of the Succubi, the RPG Maker element being added to an adult game tends to just mean that it's a bad adult game, because any kind of role-playing game is just going to be something that takes way too much time. We have a paper doll game for free, so that's a thought, but it's just this one character, and I wouldn't say the clothing and costume look great. The hairstyles potentially a little too long in a lot of cases, almost dragging on the floor. And maybe I would argue that you shouldn't use the chibi anime art style of getting a really short, cute character when you're making a paper doll game. It probably would be better to have a more adult and accurately anatomically proportioned character in a paper doll game. Or maybe like if you think about Barbie and then her little sister Stacy, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think Stacy is the name of her little sister. I'm gonna stick with it if I'm wrong. I don't think it would make a lot of sense to make a paper doll video game where you could dress up Stacy and then completely ignore the fact that Barbie, as a more adult formed doll would hold the fashion and display the fashion in a longer, more interesting way. You can literally take kids like Stacy and put them all in jeans and t-shirts, and they would pretty much look exactly the same. Your average 10-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, they're all going to just be about the same shape and form. Whereas there's just a lot more curves post-puberty, to put it in a somewhat delicate way. And yeah, I would also assume that if you're playing a paper doll game, you're probably aspiring towards beauty for one reason or another. And so you want something that is better than what you yourself may look like, or what age you are. Okay, so I looked at those extra cells things, and that didn't really take me very well anywhere with the RPG Maker games, but it did take me somewhere, I guess, with the Rockstar games. There's about $60, I would guess, there, depending what you own already, that might be worth actually buying if you want to own Rockstar games. But then that is the bigger question about, do I want to own Rockstar games at all, or do I want to try and play them? They too are effectively like RPG games. If they aren't RPG games themselves, they take a long time, and there's not that much of a commentary or experience I can have there. I definitely wouldn't have anything new or interesting to say around GTA, or wouldn't have much new or interesting to say around it. Anyways, let's see if we can make the clips and do it quickly and be done with this stream. I'm still rambling on, and in rambling on, these are just turning into longer and longer streams. Perhaps that's the one thing that doing these super long 4-hour Sudoku videos is training me, is building up my tolerance to then do super long live streams of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. But yeah, I really don't want that to happen. I want more free time, not less free time, or just more time to make more of a variety of content. But yeah, let's go through the video game news, Video Games Chronicle news. Doesn't look like we have that much, so, but I don't think I tweaked the macros to try and remove duplicates either, so I don't know what's going on there. Nvidia's market value has surpassed Amazon's. The chip maker became the 4th most valuable US listed company. That's interesting. It is also, I guess, worth pointing out, though, that Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, just sold like $2 billion worth of shares from Amazon.com, which could have caused it to be a bit of a bump. We have now quickly seen several trillion dollar market value companies, and I could definitely see an argument that there should be 100% taxation of every dollar over $1 trillion in companies. Yeah, Amazon is 1.80 trillion, Nvidia is 1.83 trillion, Apple is 2.9 trillion, and Microsoft is 3.11 trillion, which Microsoft way outdoing Alphabet, parent company of Google. Whereas I'd also argue Microsoft's doing way less as far as different products and different projects than Alphabet does. Meanwhile, the other side of this argument would definitely be that it seems like people aren't super enthusiastic around the 480 Super series, or the new 4000 Super series of video cards. And yeah, I don't think we really are going to have major bumps up in quality in video cards, and that's what Nvidia is mostly known for. There might be some speculation here that the Switch 2 is going to give them a bunch of money, so people are investing early on that. That would be believable, that people are just speculating. It's also very believable that these numbers are just swinging around like crazy. We don't really follow Nvidia as a hardware manufacturer that well, so I don't know if they've been laying off people too, which could then increase the market value, because shareholders, being inherently evil people, whether they realize it or not, do see layoffs as only being financially benefit to them. Let's see, is there anything else we can really say here? I guess not, so let's just move on to the next story. Microsoft's big Xbox business update is coming on Thursday. So yeah, I thought maybe the announcement was going to be today, but it will be Thursday. That inherently means that on Wednesday we will still be talking about rumors around Microsoft, and that very possibly is killing any possibility of other news stories being published and talked about, which would explain why there don't seem to be that many news stories today, although it may just be that it's Monday. The indie hit What the Golf is coming to PlayStation. Earth Defense Force 6 Western release has been delayed to summer of 2024. Sony has heavily discounted the PS5 Slim in Europe for the first time. The Dead Cells designer says the decision to stop updates is an a-hole move by the former studio. Helldivers 2 dev says games need to earn the right to monetize. What's interesting about this, that last headline, is the way my macro works. It is grabbing the headline title, so the A word there, the a-hole word, would be in the clip. Which maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe I should sanitize that input. That's not going to happen very often. Like, this may be very much the first time there's ever been a bad word in a headline. But yeah, I guess after today's stream I'll make sure to put in some asterisks there and censor it, because I don't think that's the way to go. Although weirdly, if I didn't censor it and then I got a whole bunch of views because people were typing in the a-hole word into Google or YouTube, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a whole bunch of views, I mean, that would be weird and might be beneficial, but I still think YouTube would be upset about it. YouTube, I said in a previous stream, by the way, too, that YouTube has managed to avoid any major controversies, and actually that's pretty surprising, because there was somebody who straight up murdered somebody and showed the aftermath just a few weeks ago, and the video got taken down, I guess, very quickly, and I guess the story was weird enough, and inherently I guess YouTube is not catching heat from that because the video just got taken down very quickly, whereas YouTube often gets in trouble when they're wishy-washy and they don't take things down that probably should be taken down, or when they allow things explicitly that people think should be taken down. But I guess they might be getting a little bit better of avoiding those kinds of controversies. Moving on. Silent Hill: The Short Message has been downloaded over 2 million times. Switch 2 will reportedly feature a custom Nvidia chip. Take note, we just talked about Nvidia's share price going up. Phil Spencer has reportedly reassured employees Microsoft won't stop making Xbox consoles. Take-Two has delayed the new action RPG from Ori developer Moon Studios. Now, Moon Studios, though, is not Twin Moon, so you have to be careful not to confuse the two. Twin Moon is Dead Cells, Moon Studios is Ori series. And then our last story should be here. Football Manager 2024 hits a series record 7 million players. And that is an older story, but the rest of them were actually newer stories. And so maybe there's something about my macro where if it doesn't go to page 2, it's more accurate on the older stories. But obviously too, it needs to not bother to open up that one last older story, or we're going to get repetition, which is not a big deal, but it is wasting time. We also don't have that many Gematsu articles, so we can burn through this very quickly. I still haven't really put enough thought into the GameDeveloper.com news stories, whether I want to make clips around them or not. I probably will allow them once I've got the code mostly written and done well. So that's going to bring us to the Gematsu articles. The Xbox official podcast special edition is set for February 15th, featuring an Xbox business updates. This might be interesting in that the Xbox official podcast itself might drastically change what it is, where it's been most often pretty laid back and more just like a podcast of 3 random people versus what would be considered a advertisement arm of Xbox to promote Xbox or put out press releases from Xbox. So it's going to be Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and Matt Booty sharing the updates. I think that's the 3 people on the Xbox official podcast. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of stuff is changing right now in hopes of either Matt Booty or Sarah Bond taking over Xbox in a more permanent way, and Phil Spencer potentially getting promoted or retiring. Moving on. Girl Genius Adventures in Castle Heterodyne for Switch launches April 3rd. That's a bit of a mouthful. Heterodyne. I'd like to kind of see a screenshot here of what this game really looks like. T for Teen, Nintendo Switch thing. So it's kind of like a Fortnite girl with well, Fortnite maybe is the wrong phrase to use. A 3D model girl that looks more like one of the Overwatch characters, I would say. That's what I was thinking. And she's got this big wrench, and so she's platforming, and she's fighting robots in kind of imaginative ways. It doesn't look terrible. I guess the question here to ask is, has this been on Steam before? Had I checked that first, that would have been smarter. So this is another one of these examples where the game just has really no relevancy. So I've had 26 reviews from 2023, which is not that long ago. I kind of have to make an executive decision here and say, yes, put this on the wish list. But it's not going to come out on the Switch, and then my coverage of this game would get more views because it came out on the Switch. there we go. Finally. So there's no reason to like rush and try and play this game and make footage. I'll play it much later. Shirin the Wanderer, the mystery dungeon of Serpent Coil Island, details Peach Bun and monsters. Open world camper van exploration game Outbound has been announced for PC. Outbound. It's an interesting thought, certainly, as far as, do you really want this experience? And can you make a game around this? Or really have all you done is added VW Bus to a survival game? But even that might not be the worst idea. So if you're going to make a game like Raft but not set it on the ocean, here you go. A spiritual successor to Raft might work around that concept. So I'll give it a chance. Now I'm not sure if I programmed this right, so when I go back to the tab I just started with, I may still get duplicate clips at that point. If I programmed it perfectly I wouldn't, but I'm not sure. Nintendo 64 style collectathon platformer Cavern of Dreams is coming to the Switch on February 29th. This is currently available on PC. Do we have a Steam link though? It's no Steam link. Interesting. Matsu is usually pretty good about having a Steam link to it, but not today. So, guess what we'll do is we should just search it now and do it that way. This is rated very positively, and it must have just been one I overlooked. So, whatever. I'll try and add it to the wish list if the page really is going to load. Maybe that taking that long for the wish list to change might be the problem as to why adding to the cart just goes to a new page. Maybe that's more bulletproof and just more efficient, even faster. What the Golf is coming to the PS4 and 5 on March 14th. This too is on Steam, and it is already on my wish list, rated very positively. I imagine we're going to see a lot of things that that are going to Switch as a last ditch effort, but it also seems weird that we're having things go to Switch. Although in this case, I'm misreading this, it's going to PS5 and 4. So usually we see this story as they're coming to the Switch after they've been on everything else, where this is going to the PS4 and 5 since it's already been on the Switch and PC and Apple Arcade. Weirdly, no Xbox support though. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai Sweep the Board has a game overview trailer. Earth Defense Force 6 has been delayed to the summer in the West. Here's an example of Earth Defense Force 6, and yeah, the graphics are getting better. Let's see what the reviews are. Nope, no reviews, it's not out yet. Part of the problem with the Earth Defense Force series though is that they churn out games really fast. So they don't have long periods in which they could improve their games even if they wanted to. Although it seems like their hope is just to sell as many games as fast as possible to make money, which I don't think really works, particularly in the West. It might work better in Japan. Turbo Golf Racing launches in Q2 of 2024 for the PS5, Xbox One, and Series, and also PC. A co-op hack and slash action game called Go Fight Fantastic for PC launches March 16th. Give that a chance. Sword of the Necromancer 3D remake Sword of the Necromancer Resurrected has been announced for all consoles and PC. Interesting. When did this game originally come out though? Looking at these screenshots, this wasn't really what I was expecting, and I still have no idea what the original version of the game was. See if we can find something in the description. Sword of the Necromancer was a 2021 game that has now just been remade in 3D. Seems weird. I wonder if this game actually does play around the idea of being a necromancer, since you have all these like red spirits in this sword. The more things you kill, the stronger your sword gets. Still not really a necromancer policy of power. You would have to resurrect dead things that were killed with your sword, which maybe that would work. I'm noticing that my connections are dropping fairly frequently these days too, for just a second while I'm streaming. I'm also noticing my computer is increasingly spinning up its fans when I'm arguably not doing that much. Although, weirdly, my computer does kind of speed up its fans when there's a ton of tabs open and a lot of RAM being used. Anyways, moving on, we need to wrap up here. Silent Hill: The Short Message tops 2 million downloads. This week's Japanese game releases include Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Skull and Bones, and more. Certain Affinity co-developing Exodus. And that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles, and we won't have too many of those, and then we'll be done. Archetype brings in Certain Affinity to co-develop the debut game Exodus. DC Universe Online developer Dimensional Inc. has been hit with layoffs. I'm not sure DC Universe Online is still actually online, which maybe highlights the problem of calling your game online. I think that maybe there's a fan server for DC Universe Online that they license to fans to continue running. I guess I'm wrong about this. DC Universe Online first released in 2011, gradually expanded to more consoles over the years. Right now, Dimensional Inc. was bringing the game to current consoles, so I must be thinking of a different online game with superheroes, because that doesn't seem like that's the case with DC Universe Online. That being said, there should be some kind of DC MMO with superheroes online, but at this point, a full-on reboot of that idea, refresh of that idea, might make some sense. Even when you look at the outfits and the animation style. This feels kind of disconnected from what modern DC is, or the direction modern DC comics are going. Nintendo says Super Mario Bros. Wonder soared due to multiplayer magic. Obituary: League of Geeks co-founder Adam Duncan has passed away. That is going to be, if that was a clip, that would have been a really weird clip. Certainly in the midst of all the other clips, but whatever. That's just going to happen. Helldivers 2 defies studio expectations after selling 1 million copies. And Skybound adds EA alum amid potential acquisition drive. Right. And we're not going to do a follow list cleanup, which is consistently not working. Something about that code is broken. And we're not going to look at new games, which we pretty much could look at new games if I wanted to at that time. But I just don't think that fully makes sense. Although, if all of a sudden clips do start to make sense and people start jumping into my videos where a clip is, maybe looking at games after the clips might get me more watch time. Maybe there is just a percentage of an audience that doesn't care about the Yu-Gi-Oh! At front, nor do they have an easy way. In all fairness, they don't have an easy way to skip the first hour and get past Yu-Gi-Oh! To get into video game news. So clips might be helpful anchors in that part. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.